My name is Lily, and the air in this opulent law office felt thin, stretched taut with unspoken fears. I had just received a call from a lawyer, Mr. Thompson, a man whose voice usually conveyed the calm authority of old money. This time, it was laced with an urgency I hadn't heard, an edge of panic. He had said it was about my parents and their critical financial situation. I walked into the spacious conference room, the heavy oak door swinging shut behind me with a muted thud. The room was designed to impress, all dark wood and polished chrome, a large window framing the indifferent city skyline. And there they were, sitting across a vast table, two figures I barely recognized. Robert and Maria, my parents. They were a picture of frayed desperation. My mother, Maria, once so meticulously put together, now clutched a crumpled tissue in hands that trembled visibly. Her blonde hair, usually styled perfectly, was flat and lifeless, and deep shadows sagged beneath her eyes, once sparkling with ambition. My father, Robert, had shrunk into his expensive suit. His usually commanding posture was gone, replaced by a defeated slump. His gaze, once so unshakable, now darted nervously, avoiding mine, fixing on some invisible spot on the mahogany table. Their usual air of suburban comfort, of quiet, understated superiority, had evaporated entirely. A stillness, deep and unyielding, settled within me. My charcoal blazer was tailored, my expression unreadable. My blonde hair, pulled back into a sleek, professional ponytail, felt cool against my neck. I moved with a deliberate slowness, taking my place at the head of the table. Mr. Thompson, a man I rarely saw outside of formal letters, cleared his throat, his face a mask of practiced concern. His eyes, though, kept flicking between my parents and me, a silent plea in their depths. Lily, Maria began, her voice a reedy whisper, barely audible. She reached a hand across the table, then hesitated, letting it fall back to her lap. Robert finally managed to lift his head. His eyes, once so stern, now held a pleading, almost begging quality. Your mother's right, sweetie. Our retirement fund, it's gone. Everything. Donovan's startup, it tanked. He looked at me, a flicker of his old entitlement returning, quickly overshadowed by abject fear. We need your help, Lily. Save them. The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded, echoing a phantom plea from a different time, a different me. I met their gaze one after the other. My mother's eyes, red-rimmed and swimming with tears, and my father's, now wide with open desperation. I could feel their fear, their vulnerability, radiating across the polished surface of the table. It was a potent, intoxicating sensation, a stark reversal of everything I had ever known. My posture remained straight, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the moment stretch, letting them truly feel the weight of their words. The silence in the room became almost deafening, filled only with the frantic thumping of my own heart, a drumbeat of years of suppressed resentment, finally finding its resonant rhythm. Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, probably anticipating a breakdown, either theirs or mine. But I offered neither. I looked at them, truly looked at them, and saw not the towering figures of my childhood, but two broken, desperate people. Years of neglect, cold indifference, and casual cruelty flashed before my eyes in a silent, searing montage. The Christmas I had spent huddled in a corner, my threadbare hoodie, a stark contrast to the glittering tree that never held a gift for me. The day I was told my dreams were too big, my aspirations too expensive. The day I was told I was on my own. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. It was not a smile of warmth or forgiveness. It was something sharper, colder, a glint of steel. My parents recoiled slightly, sensing the shift, the hidden blade. They didn't understand yet, couldn't possibly fathom the journey that had brought me to this very seat, in this very room, at this precise moment. Your retirement, you say, I stated, my voice level, devoid of any emotion they could latch onto. My mother nodded frantically, her tears finally overflowing. Yes, Lily. Please. We have nothing left. I asked, my gaze unwavering, pinning them in place. The question was not merely a question. It was an affirmation of power. Robert tried to rally a faint echo of his former self. Of course, Lily. You've done so well for yourself. We're so proud of you. Your company, Lily Solutions, it's a tremendous success. We always knew you had it in you. I paused, letting his words hang, sour and hypocritical, in the air. Family. That word from them tasted like ash in my mouth. I finally took another deep breath, my sharp eyes sweeping over everyone in the room. Mr. Thompson, my mother, my father. They all leaned forward, desperate for an answer, desperate for salvation. My answer depends on a story that began long before this room, long before your desperation. It began with a little girl who believed in promises, a little girl named Lily. I remembered myself then, a child of 9, with messy blonde curls and eyes that still held the innocent glint of hope. I believed in magic, in Santa Claus, and most fiercely, I believed in my parents, Robert and Maria. They had painted a vibrant picture of my future, one where I would attend a prestigious university, a place like Stanford or Yale. This future had a name, the Lily's Future Fund. It wasn't just a savings account, it was a sacred promise. Every birthday, every Christmas, instead of toys, I received another certificate, a neatly printed update on its growth. My parents would proudly declare, "This is for your 4-year full ride, Lily. Your ticket to anywhere you want to go." I saw it as my golden key, a tangible symbol of their love and my boundless potential. Christmas was always a grand, glittering affair in our suburban home. Twinkling lights adorned every window. The scent of pine and gingerbread filled the air, and our massive tree stood laden with ornaments and gifts. Yet, even in the heart of this warmth, I often found myself on the periphery, a quiet observer. That year, however, the chill was different. It wasn't just my usual feeling of being slightly out of place. It was a premonition. I was playing quietly by the staircase, pretending to read a book, when I heard their voices, hushed and urgent, drifting from the living room. My mother Maria sounded anxious. "What about Lily's fund, Robert?" "My father," Robert replied, his tone low but firm. "It's the only way, Maria. Donovan's startup, this is a sure thing." They spoke of Donovan's future, of his genius, of the millions he would make. My own name, when it came up, was a fleeting afterthought. A few nights later, they called me into the living room. The Christmas tree lights cast long, dancing shadows. My mother sat beside my father on the plush sofa, their faces somber. My father cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "Lily, sweetie," he began. "Donovan has a brilliant opportunity, a startup that could change everything for our family." He paused, and my mother picked up the thread, her voice strained. "We've decided to invest in it." I remember the silence that followed, thick and suffocating. I didn't understand, not yet. Then my father continued, his voice carefully casual. "We'll be withdrawing the money from your college fund. Just a temporary measure, of course. It's for the family, Lily." My world, meticulously built on promises and trust, splintered into a million pieces. The Lily's Future Fund, my golden key, my secured future, it was gone. Not stolen by a stranger, but taken by the very hands that had promised to protect it. The betrayal was a physical ache, a gaping wound in my chest. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry in front of them. I just stood there, a small desolate figure, my dreams lying shattered at my feet. Later that night, I hid in my room, the grand festive house suddenly feeling cold and cavernous. I muffled my sobs into my pillow, trying desperately to keep them from hearing. Then, from the hallway, I heard their voices again, faint but clear. My mother's concerned whisper, then my father's dismissive tone. "She doesn't really need such an expensive school anyway," he said. Those words, so casually cruel, pierced through me. My heart, already broken, froze solid. Those casually cruel words from Robert, so dismissive, became the chilling soundtrack to my adolescence. After that night, the gilded cage of my childhood began to truly rust. My parents, Robert and Maria, truly believed their casual cruelty was justified. Donovan's startup ate up more than just my college fund. It became a black hole, sucking in all their attention, their resources, and their dwindling patience with me. I was only 9, but I understood. My future was no longer their concern. The certificates for Lily's future fund disappeared from my room. My birthday and Christmas gifts became token gestures, if they appeared at all. By the time I entered high school, the unspoken rule was clear. I was on my own. I worked. Oh, how I worked. After school, on weekends, every holiday break. My first job was washing dishes at a greasy spoon diner. The smell of stale oil still occasionally haunts my dreams. Then I cleaned houses, tutored younger kids, stocked shelves at a grocery store, babysat for neighbors who often forgot to pay me on time. Each paycheck, no matter how small, was a victory. It meant textbooks, bus fare, sometimes even a decent meal that wasn't instant noodles. My clothes were always worn, my shoes patched. I didn't care. I was earning my way piece by painful piece. Stanford, Yale, my childhood dreams. They became distant constellations, beautiful but unattainable. I applied to them anyway, fueled by a stubborn defiance, a small part of me still hoping for a miracle, for my parents to step in. The acceptance letters arrived, thick envelopes filled with glossy brochures. They felt like taunts. I showed them to Robert and Maria once, a hesitant plea in my eyes. Robert glanced at them, then back at his newspaper. He mumbled. Maria just sighed. There was no miracle. There was only the harsh reality of tuition fees that dwarfed my meager savings. So I made a choice. A pragmatic, painful choice. Community college. It wasn't a bad place. It offered an education, a stepping stone. But it wasn't the vibrant campus life I'd imagined, the intellectual fervor, the limitless possibilities. It was a quiet compromise, a retreat from a dream that had been ripped away. My classmates, my friends from high school, they were off to grand adventures. I scrolled through their social media feeds, seeing beaming faces at orientation events, dorm room decorating parties, football games. They were discussing majors, exchange programs, internships. I was discussing my next shift, calculating how many hours I needed to work to cover the next semester's books. A gnawing ache settled in my stomach. Not envy exactly. More like a profound sense of isolation, of being left behind on a different path, one I hadn't chosen. I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of a life that should have been mine. Home became less a haven, more a waypoint between shifts. My parents, Robert and Maria, hardly noticed my absence. Every conversation was about him. His new brilliant idea, his latest investor pitch, his struggles, his needs. My own achievements, my grades, my exhausting work schedule, they were invisible. Maria would offer a strained smile. There was no praise, no encouragement, no acknowledgement of the immense effort I was putting in just to survive. I stopped trying to share. The silence was less painful than their indifference. My bond with them frayed, then snapped, replaced by a hollow emptiness. I was just a girl living under their roof, but utterly alone. The loneliness, the exhaustion, the constant struggle, it could have broken me. But something else happened instead. A hardened resolve began to form deep within. I learned to rely on no one but myself. Every problem, every challenge, I tackled it head on. I became meticulously organized, balancing schoolwork, multiple jobs, and what little sleep I could snatch. I stopped waiting for someone to save me. I became my own savior. Every scraped knee, every setback, fueled a silent promise. I would not just survive, I would thrive. The world had shown me its cruelest side, and I was learning to fight back, to build my own armor. The smart, sensitive girl who once cried into her pillow was still there, but now she had a core of steel. I was tougher, smarter, more resourceful than they could ever imagine. One night, after an endless shift at the diner, scrubbing grease off plates until my hands ached, I dragged myself home. The house was dark, silent, everyone else asleep. I walked into the bathroom, the harsh fluorescent light reflecting my tired face in the mirror. Dark circles smudged under my eyes, my skin was pale, my shoulders hunched with fatigue. But as I stared at my reflection, I saw something else, too. A flicker, a spark deep within those tired green eyes. It was defiance. It was purpose. I slowly straightened my back, pulling myself up to my full, albeit still gangly, height. "I will never let anyone control my destiny again," I whispered, the words a raw, fierce promise to the girl staring back at me. I straightened my back, pulling myself up to my full, albeit still gangly, height. "I will never let anyone control my destiny again," I whispered, the words a raw, fierce promise to the girl staring back at me. Years blurred, a relentless uphill climb. I was 26 now, the struggling community college student a distant memory. My path wasn't paved with easy victories, but with relentless hard work and an unyielding will. I had clawed my way into a reputable firm, starting at the very bottom, learning everything I could. Nights were spent devouring books on finance, law, and corporate structures. Every spare moment was an investment in myself, a silent rebellion against the future they had tried to dictate. My small apartment, my modest savings, my growing career, they were all mine, a testament to my own strength. Robert and Maria were still names I heard from time to time, usually from distant relatives who offered platitudes about family. I politely listened, but my heart remained closed. One rainy Saturday, I was cleaning out an old box of my things from my teen years. It had been stored away in the back of a dusty closet, forgotten. Among faded photographs and old-school projects, I stumbled upon a thick envelope. It was labeled Donovan's Ventures in Robert's sprawling handwriting. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach, but a morbid curiosity compelled me to open it. Inside, a jumble of papers lay nestled, old bank statements, business proposals, invoices, and expense reports, documents I had never seen before. I spread them across my kitchen table, the fluorescent light stark against the yellowed pages. My eyes scanned the dates, the figures. The very first statement showed a large withdrawal from what I immediately recognized as the Lily's Future Fund account. My breath hitched. This wasn't just a few thousand. It was a substantial chunk, taken shortly after that fateful Christmas conversation. A temporary measure for what? As I delved deeper, the truth began to unravel, hideous and undeniable. The funds weren't going into Donovan's startup, as they had claimed. Oh, some small amounts were, undoubtedly. But the vast majority? It was funneled into something else entirely. Expensive restaurant bills, luxury car rentals, designer clothing, lavish vacations. My vision of their investment as a noble, if misguided, sacrifice for Donovan's future shattered. Donovan's startup wasn't a struggling venture they were pouring their life savings into. It was a convenient, flimsy cover. A shell corporation, barely generating any income, used to mask a bottomless pit of wasteful, irresponsible spending. Robert and Maria weren't victims of a bad investment. They were active participants in their own financial ruin. And they had dragged my future down with them, blaming me for my lack of family spirit, when it was their own reckless indulgence that had drained my dreams dry. My hands trembled as I sifted through the evidence. The anger, a slow-burning ember for years, flared into a scorching inferno. It wasn't just the money. It was the lie, the cruel, calculated deception. They had stolen my future, then gaslighted me into believing it was for the greater good, for our family. My college fund hadn't been an investment. It had been their personal ATM for a life of excess. Then, buried beneath a stack of mundane utility bills, I found it. A receipt. A single glossy receipt for an extravagant, all-inclusive luxury cruise to the Caribbean. The date screamed at me. My fingers clamped around the paper, the edges biting into my palm. A cold, chilling hatred surged through me, consuming every last vestige of the girl who once yearned for their approval. The discovery of that cruise receipt, the undeniable proof of their lavish self-indulgence at my expense, solidified everything. My anger wasn't a tempest anymore. It was a glacier, moving slowly, inevitably. I knew then that I wouldn't just build a life. I would build an empire. An empire forged from their betrayal, an unbreakable fortress no one could ever breach again. I threw myself into my work with a singular, ruthless focus. Community college had been my training ground, and now I sought a larger battlefield. I moved to Seattle, a city buzzing with innovation, a place where anonymity was a shield and opportunity bloomed for those who dared to seize it. I started at the very bottom of a small tech firm, a nameless cog in a vast machine. But I absorbed every detail, every process, every nuance of data management and financial systems. My ambition was a silent, burning fire. I worked longer, harder, smarter than anyone else. I enrolled in night courses, earning certifications in forensic accounting and cybersecurity. I learned to dissect financial records, to spot the hidden anomalies, the phantom transactions, the digital breadcrumbs of deception. My name, Lily, became synonymous with meticulousness, with an uncanny ability to uncover what others wanted to keep hidden. Slowly, painstakingly, I climbed, from junior analyst to team lead, then department head, and finally senior management. I was no longer just an employee. I was an indispensable asset, building a reputation for uncompromising integrity and formidable skill. Every penny I earned was managed with the precision of a master chess player. My personal finances became an extension of my professional discipline. I invested shrewdly, diversified my portfolio, and watched my wealth accumulate with quiet satisfaction. I purchased a modern apartment in the city's quiet suburbs, a sanctuary of glass and steel overlooking the vast, glittering expanse of Seattle. It was a home I had built entirely for myself, a stark contrast to the borrowed corners of my childhood. The family, the Donovans, Robert and Maria, they remained a distant hum in the background of my life. I maintained superficial ties, sending polite holiday cards, exchanging perfunctory phone calls every few months. Enough to keep the thread from snapping completely, but never enough to let them pull me back into their orbit. I never spoke of my successes, my growing influence, my true capabilities. They knew nothing of the woman I had become, the power I now wielded. I was a ghost to them, and I preferred it that way. For a decade, I didn't just build a career, I built a case. The documents I had discovered years ago, detailing the initial siphoning of my fund, were merely the first thread in a much larger tapestry of deceit. I used my growing expertise, my access to sophisticated databases and analytical tools to delve deeper. I learned about corporate structures, shell companies, offshore accounts. Every rumor, every hushed whisper about Donovan Enterprises that I'd overheard as a child, I pursued relentlessly. I found patterns, discrepancies, millions of dollars moving through labyrinthine channels, mirroring the small, crude siphoning that had stolen my future. My suspicions solidified into certainty. Their financial profligacy was not just self-inflicted. It was a systemic rot, a decades-long scheme orchestrated by the very people who had once called themselves my family. Uncle John, Aunt Carol. They were at the heart of it. And Robert and Maria? My parents' names appeared in some of these older records, tied to accounts that, on the surface, looked legitimate, but were subtly intertwined with the Donovan web. A flicker of doubt, a nascent, terrifying thought began to form. What if there was more to their recklessness than I had understood? What if they, too, were pawns or worse targets? The hatred I held for them began to soften, to transmute into a cold, clinical curiosity. I needed to know the whole truth. I continued to consolidate my position, building Lily's Solutions into a leading firm for forensic auditing and data recovery. I didn't just understand the law, I understood the loopholes, the hidden pathways of digital money, the secrets buried beneath layers of corporate jargon. I surrounded myself with the sharpest legal minds, like Mr. Harrison and Sarah, who would become invaluable mentors, unknowingly preparing me for the ultimate confrontation. I gathered irrefutable evidence, enough to bring down an entire empire. Not just Donovan Enterprises, but the entire network of lies and manipulation. I had become the architect of their destruction, and they had no idea. Then one Tuesday afternoon, as the Seattle rain painted streaks across my office window, my private line rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered, my voice calm, professional. Miss. Lily, a deep, unfamiliar voice began. My name is Arthur Sterling. I'm an attorney. My hand tightened around the receiver. Robert and Maria's estate? After all these years? A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me, but beneath it a cold, unwavering certainty. This was it. The moment I had been preparing for, silently, meticulously, for what felt like an eternity. I placed the phone gently back into its cradle. The city skyline gleamed through the rain-streaked glass of my office. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips, a blend of satisfaction and a chilling, predatory resolve. "It's time," I whispered to the empty room, my voice a mere breath against the vastness of the city. The polished conference room felt cold, sterile, a stark contrast to the chaotic warmth of my childhood home. Yet this room, with its panoramic view of the Seattle skyline, was where my future had truly begun. My parents, Robert and Maria, sat across the gleaming table, their faces etched with lines of worry I had never seen before. Their eyes, once so quick to judge my ambition, now held a desperate, pleading glint. Arthur Sterling, their lawyer, cleared his throat, but I cut him off with a raised hand. This wasn't his story to tell. It was mine. "You called me here," I began, my voice steady, devoid of emotion, "because you face financial ruin." I let that sink in. Their faces paled further. "You want my help." My gaze settled on Robert, then Maria. "Let me tell you a story." I leaned forward slightly, my eyes never leaving theirs. "You see, for years I believed your narrative." I paused, letting a sliver of my carefully constructed composure crack, revealing the raw edge underneath. I pushed a stack of documents across the table. They were meticulously organized, each page a testament to years of quiet, relentless pursuit of the truth. "This," I said, my finger tapping a specific receipt, "is a record of a luxury cruise to the Caribbean." Maria gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Robert's eyes darted to the receipt, then to me, a flicker of fear mixed with recognition. "It coincided perfectly," I continued, "down to the very day, with the largest withdrawal ever made from my college fund." "That wasn't an investment, was it, Robert?" "Maria?" I listed the dates, the amounts, the fraudulent transfers, the fabricated investment statements I had found buried in their old files. Each detail was a fresh stab, delivered with surgical precision. "My lack of family spirit you always chastised me for? It was your convenient excuse for stealing my future." Their initial shock gave way to anger. Robert finally sputtered, his face flushed. "We did our best." Maria started to weep, her face contorted in shame. But their anger and tears held no sway over me anymore. I had seen them too many times. I scoffed, a cold, humorless sound escaping my lips. I pushed another file towards them. "And this is the paper trail. The shell companies, the false invoices, the offshore accounts." Robert and Maria recoiled, their faces shifting from anger to genuine despair. They knew. They knew I knew everything. The room fell silent, the weight of my words pressing down on them, crushing their last vestiges of dignity. The power had shifted irrevocably. It was no longer theirs to wield over me, but mine to hold over them. I stood up, my gaze sweeping across Robert and Maria one last time. "I built my life from the wreckage you left." I turned and walked away, leaving behind the deafening silence and the crumbling ruins of their lives. I walked out of that conference room, the hum of the city a muted backdrop to the roaring silence in my ears. The elevator descended, taking me away from their shattered faces, away from the crumbling remnants of their carefully constructed lies. I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me there. As the taxi wove through the familiar streets of Seattle, I felt a lightness I hadn't known was possible. A weight, one I had carried for what felt like my entire life, had finally been lifted. My apartment, high above the city, felt like a sanctuary. I walked in, shedding my corporate armor, the silence a welcome embrace. It wasn't triumph I felt, not exactly. It was something deeper, a profound sense of release. A decade of planning, of relentless pursuit, had culminated in that single decisive moment. My life now was everything they had tried to prevent me from having. My company, Lily's Solutions, was thriving, a testament to my resilience, my vision. I had built it with my own hands, my own mind, piece by painstaking piece, from the absolute nothingness they had left me with. The phantom pains of betrayal, the echoes of their scorn, had finally faded. My days were no longer consumed by the ghost of their injustice, but by the tangible reality of my achievements. I was strong, independent, and utterly unburdened. The past was no longer a chain, it was a stepping stone. People often ask me about forgiveness. Does it bring peace? Does it heal old wounds? For me, true peace came not from absolving them of their sins, but from holding them accountable. Justice in its purest form was my retribution. It was watching their empire built on deceit and my stolen future crumble. Forgiving them would have meant diminishing my own suffering, invalidating the years of struggle. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't. My loyalty was to the child I once was, the one they had abandoned. My obligation was to my parents, Robert and Maria, whose names I had cleared, whose innocence I had proven through the downfall of Donovan Enterprises. They, the Donovan family, had chosen their path, had drawn the battle lines. I simply chose to fight back. Boundaries, I learned, are not just walls to keep others out, but foundations upon which to build your own strength. My true family now consisted of Mr. Harrison, Sarah, and the few loyal individuals who had believed in me, who had seen my potential when others saw only an orphan. My story is not unique. So many of us carry the scars of family betrayal, of dreams deferred, of potential suppressed. Do not let anyone define your worth. Do not let anyone steal your future. If I, a girl they tried to crush into oblivion, could rise from the ashes, then so can you. Protect your peace. Fight for your happiness. Define your own boundaries, fiercely and without apology. Your dreams are yours alone, and no one, not even family, has the right to dismantle them. The path to healing isn't always through forgiveness. Sometimes it's through justice. Sometimes it's simply through walking away and building a better life for yourself. Never underestimate your own resilience, your own capacity to overcome. The city outside my window began to awaken. Streaks of orange and pink painted the eastern sky, chasing away the last vestiges of night. A new day. A new beginning. The light filled my apartment, bright and clear, illuminating every corner, leaving no shadows for the past to hide in. I stood there, watching the sunrise, feeling the warmth on my face. My journey had been long and arduous, but I had arrived. This was my peace. This was my freedom, and it was just the beginning.